Thank you, Wendy. So today we're going to look at the state of cybersecurity. What are people doing for cybersecurity defense? What are the threat trends? What kinds of best practices and things are applicable? And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about cybersecurity frameworks and how those could help support people's cyber defense and cyber hygiene. And then we'll spend a couple minutes talking about some implications for the future. So, state of cybersecurity, as we can see in the almost daily news, is not that great. So, what's been going on? So, in 2017, and even just a little bit here in 2018, we're seeing that major cybersecurity incidents are continuing. Most notably, last year was Equifax, where about 150 million people's information was breached. The Uber announced or admitted last year that they had an incident where almost over 50 million records were accessed. And then, of course, beginning of last year was the famous WannaCry ransomware attacks, where people were demanding ransom, Bitcoin, and Yahoo was again in the news, this time admitting that all of their accounts information had been breached. Then there was this company called Deeproot Analytics, and information about 198 million voters, U.S. Verizon had a breach where PIN numbers for some of their cell phone accounts, mobile accounts were taken. And yet again, even after all of the publicity about Target and Home Depot and all these other places, Intercontinental Hotels was struck yet again by point of sale attack at 1,200 locations. So things are continuing. Attacks are not stopping. So what are the types of attacks that we're seeing in 2017? First of all, it was announced that somebody had managed to, I don't know if they broke into the NSA, but they managed to get access to some malware that the NSA, the National Security Agency, was using as part of their cyber espionage work. And some of that started showing up in things like WannaCry, which is the ransomware that was being spread around. We've seen an increase in what we might call phishing expeditions. Their techniques are improving. With the development of Bitcoin, the cyber criminals felt that they are now have a little bit more anonymity in demanding their payment for ransomware. As we've seen, there's more data breaches. We've seen several well-publicized attacks from Internet of Things. One point, they took a lot of IoT. I think there were cameras that had not had their configurations changed from the default, and they organized them into doing attacks on various computer systems, computer people. And there's a new thing that's coming out with the rise of Bitcoin. And most times the criminals they're trying to get to data. They're trying to get something that they can sell for money. Well, in this case, they have what's called now cryptojacking. People are hijacking people's computers to mine Bitcoin. So that's a new thing that's starting to spread. So we still have, as I mentioned with the IoT, we still have application vulnerabilities. They're still a big factor. This is a few years ago, but some students in Germany did a study. They went around seeing there's a database called Mongo. It's very popular, and they discovered that many people are not changing the default configurations. And so if you have the default password, admin password, for some online database, we might basically left the door unlocked for people to come in. So those are issues. The OWASP, which is the Open Web Application Security Project, has a list of what they call the 10 critical web application flaws. They updated it last year. I won't go through all of these, but you can see that there's things such as injection, where if you have a type-in box on a web page, what they do is they have software that simulates the user, and they dump a bunch of commands in there, hoping that they will somehow get some of those commands to be executed if the application isn't designed properly. There's issues with authentication, access control is not set up. Then they have you can get untrusted data and other kinds of things. One of the main things is that applications are put together and they're linked, and some of the libraries that are used found to have some kind of an issue, but people don't relink their applications, so they're running with obsolete versions of components that have security flaws. So anyway, so OWASP has this. They have a whole website that has a lot of information about vulnerabilities, more detail, and it's a good resource. So, the cyber attacks fall into some patterns. Verizon, a couple of years ago, analyzed these several 10,000s of incidents that they were tracking, over 63,000, and came up with this list. There's point of sale, there's web applications, there's insider and privileged misuse. So somebody, disgruntled employee, or somebody gets access to something they shouldn't have had access to because the access wasn't properly managed. Physical theft, like laptops get stolen. Crimeware, this is things you can download off the internet that give you sort of a whole dashboard to go off and try to penetrate computer systems. The payment card skimmers, denial of service, espionage, and then miscellaneous errors. Stuff happens, and then they call everything else, and they took the impersonation of letter message supposedly from the CEO, please wire $1 million to so and so because we have to pay them so much money. Those kind of incidents. So they've identified these various patterns. So I'll get into this a little bit more. We're going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about the state of cyber defense. So how do we know? How do we know what's happening? How do we know how good people are doing? Are things improving? Are they getting worse in terms of cyber defense? And there's a lot of companies that do these different studies that issue reports every year. Verizon is one of the better ones. So we're going to spend a minute talking about some terms here, just so everybody understands, basic understanding. The federal government, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has a dictionary, a glossary of terms. So cybersecurity is defined as the ability to protect or defend the use of cyberspace from cyber attacks. So we have to know what cyberspace is. And this is a wonderful, only the government could come up with this definition. But basically, it's having to do with a network of information systems, including the internet. So it's this whole interconnected way that we have nowadays of your phones and your computer systems and your websites, everything all hooked together. And an cyber attack is an attack that comes in via cyberspace. And excuse me. So mostly these are for disrupting, disabling, destroying, and maliciously controlling a computer environment, or destroying the integrity of data, or stealing information. So that's traditionally been what the cyber attacks about. They want to disrupt, disable, destroy, or control. So